Skip, you've had a couple of guys take some time off in that series against Detroit, guys that play basically for you 95% of the time. What are those conversations like, is to say, hey, when do you want it? They come to you, you go to them, because it's very difficult to get Jose Altuve, Kyle Tucker, and ultimately Alex Bregman off the field.
Yeah, and they definitely would not come to me asking for off days. Those guys are not. They're not that type. It's just me, making sure that I got to think about those guys, especially when we're in the middle of a 16-game stretch or here, and then we have another off day that we got another 13 in a row. And for us to get back in it, we have to be proactive and get those guys to breathe and get them off their feet, since we've been asking them to do a lot the first 5 weeks of the season.
How do you like Kyle Tucker in the 2 spot? So far, very productive for you.
He's it don't matter where you hit him. He's such a great hitter, man. So polished. His ability to hit lefties, righties. He's walking, taking pitches, borderline pitches, getting big hits on the bases. His Gold Glove defense. He's just one of the best players in the big league, no doubt.
Have you settled on what you want to do for the latter portions of this 4-game series in terms of pitching? I know you use Hunter Brown this weekend out of the bullpen, but just a thought about the next couple of days and how you see your rotation settling in.
Yeah, so we want to give this guys an extra day. So at some point here we'll go to a 6-man. We have Blanco today. We go Valdez and Javier. Then we'll give Hunter Brown start against Milwaukee, and he's just trying to get these guys some space here, so they could all get an extra day of rest. Especially that we got so many games with teams within our division. Want to make sure that we keep them fresh. Also thinking about our bullpen. If those starters are good, it pays off for our bullpen when it comes to the rest and recovery.
And speaking of keeping guys fresh, what is it like handling Yanier Diaz, his first year as a full-time catcher, as far as conversations with him of when to DH him, when to maybe give him a day off, and all the work that he needs to put in?
You know what? The work is there. He does it every single day. Just conversations that I have with him. He has never cut these many games in his career in a row. In the minor leagues, obviously. Those guys have off days. They map it out with a couple of DH days in there, just trying to keep those guys healthy through player development. But here in the big leagues, it's a little bit different. We're trying to develop player at the major league level, but winning it becomes an underlying thing that we must focus on. So it's looking his progression, looking where he's at physically and mentally, and trying to keep him fresh. It's a lot of workload. There's a lot that goes into the preparation aspect of things that I want to make sure that we're not overloading him with a ton of information, that he's able to, sit back, you DH today, come in, work on the cages, on your receiving, and I get you back in there tomorrow. That's kind of how it's been. That's the way we plan it even before the season started.
Joe Espada with us here, the Astros manager on Sports Talk 790 with Matt and Ross. Skip, there are fan favorites every year. Sometimes they're just because they're cute and lovable. Sometimes they're just very productive, and maybe sometimes they're both. And the Mauricio Dubon fan club has grown, I feel like, in the last couple of years because of his performance on the field, his versatility. He stepped in for Altuve last year, and no matter where you put him in, he seems to help the cause. What is it like mapping out his schedule? I mean, anybody would want to play 6-7 days, but you have to be the super utility player. What are those conversations like? Where do you like to see him? How often do you want to see him?
If I could, I see him, we see him 5-6 times a week, and what makes Dubon so good is the fact that he understands his role. And, if he's on the field every single day, there's other guys that if I decide to give him an off day, that's when he really comes into play. It's when you want to give an Altuve, when you want to get Tucker off his feet, he could go to left field, you could move somebody else to right. His versatility, also the pinch hit option. He gives you so many quality at bats against lefties off the bench that there's value to that. Having a weapon off the bench that gives the opponent something to think about, that's also part of the strategy.
You are navigating through the waters of your first year being a major league manager. I'm curious from you, If managing what we just discussed, getting guys in right now that lineup card every day is a bigger challenge, or perhaps managing a bullpen, for me, that would be a very difficult position because you don't know when to use a setup guy, closer, give a guy a day off, use a guy 2 or 3 days. What to you has been not necessarily a challenge, but the thing that you probably put more into than maybe you didn't as a bench coach, and now as your manager, you're doing that now?
I think the pitching side of things, one of the biggest decisions you have as a manager is when to get your starter out. You plan before the game, plan A, plan B. Once you get there, you have a pretty good idea where you want to go. But when to get the starter out, our back end of our bullpen is pretty straightforward. It's just when to get those guys middle relief to hand the ball to the back end of the bullpen. I think, just to answer your question, I think the pitching side of things is what I spend most of my day thinking about.
Yeah. Speaking of that, you have an opportunity to get some reports on Jose's performance, Urquidy, that is, at AAA, and also Chas McCormick. What kind of timeline are we looking at both those guys right now?
Yeah, so McCormick will play today and tomorrow. He is with Corpus. He'll be they're in San Antonio. We want to get Chas some at bats. We're really monitoring his progress. We're not trying to rush him. These hamstring injuries are tricky, and we don't want it to come back. He tried to play through it for a few weeks once it came up in the beginning of the season, and we don't want to go through that again. So we want to make sure that he's fully healthy. And same thing with Urquidy. He'll start this weekend for Corpus, and we want to give him multiple starts just to make sure that he's ready to go.
Last question. You brought a pitcher back in Javier over the weekend. Did not turn out the way you wanted it to for him personally. What are those visits like as he assessed himself, and how you watched him on the field Saturday in Detroit?
Yeah, you know what? So in Detroit the other day, you could just tell that he wasn't, the Javier that we know. Just for me, it was more execution and command. He looked, rusty. He looked like he hasn't been on the mound for a while, and I expect him to be much better this next time around. He's working on his mechanics. He was missing arm side and just not really locating his fastball and breaking ball. So, he's made his adjustment, and I expect him to be really good Thursday against the A's.
Joe, thanks for the time as always. We'll see you at the ballpark later tonight, and good luck against the A's.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Espada with us here on Sports Talk 790 for his weekly visit. And it was always good to catch up with the manager here on a weekly basis. Seth Martinez, one of his relievers, will join us coming up at about 2:30 this afternoon.